Hi, everyone. I'm Marcelina Pedraza, but most people call me Marcy. I've been a union electrician for 24 years now from the southeast side of Chicago, born and raised. I live and work here still, and I'm passionate about workers' rights and environmental justice. I'm a member of United Auto Workers Local 551 and an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And I'm a mom and a dog owner.
My name is Torice Sawyer. I am from UAW Local 7, Jefferson North, also known as Detroit Assembly Complex, Jefferson. I've been there since 96. I started off as a TPT. Got hired in full-time 1998. I am part of the rank and file. I work in 91, 94, and final assembly, where we call rows and narrows. And we check the headlights and actually drive the vehicle to make sure that it's inspection. So
Nicholas Livick, member of UAW Local 31 in Kansas City. In 3 days, I would have been with General Motors for a decade. Where does the time go? I'm passionate about just anything labor related. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for setting up this panel, Max.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor, and made possible by the support of listeners like you. Working People is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. If you're hungry for more worker and labor-focused shows like ours, follow the link in the show notes and go check out the other great shows in our network. And please, please support the work that we are doing here at Working People so we can keep growing and keep bringing y'all more important conversations every week. You can support us by leaving us a positive review of the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can share these episodes on your social media, and you can share them with your coworkers, your friends, and your family members. And of course, the single best thing you can do to support our work is become a paid monthly subscriber on Patreon for just $5 a month. If you subscribe for $10 a month, you'll also get a print subscription to the amazing In These Times magazine mailed to your door every month. If you haven't subscribed yet, but you want to get access to all of our great bonus episodes and support the show, just head on over to patreon.com/workingpeople. That's patreon.com/workingpeople. Hit the subscribe button, and you will immediately unlock a whole lot of awesome bonus content that we publish regularly for our subscribers. We just posted a really killer bonus episode with my man Tom Sexton from the Trillbillies, where we dug into the Oliver Anthony phenomenon, the kind of country music, working class, stuff that's going on. So me and Jules had a great chat with Tom about that. You guys don't want to miss that. So thank you to everyone who is a subscriber already. You guys are the ones who keep the show going. My name is Maximilian Alvarez, and I am very excited and grateful to be joined on this special Working People recording. You guys heard we've got my man Nick Livick, we've got Marcy, we've got Torice, we've got an incredible panel of UAW members who are, as you may have heard, in the midst of a critical contract fight with the big three automakers. And we are recording this panel on Wednesday, September 6th. We're going to try to turn it around as quickly as we can because things are heating up right now. Right, the current UAW master agreement with the big three automakers expires on September 14th. And just earlier today, UAW President Shawn Fain said in very clear terms that if any of the big three automakers does not have a contract offer on the table by then, they will see their workers strike. So we're really coming down to the showdown here. This is a pivotal contract campaign involving, a whole lot of workers in a critical industry. And so we wanted to bring Nick, Marcy, and Torice on to sort of give y'all an up-to-date view of what things are looking like from their vantage points, what they are fighting for along with their co-workers in this contract fight, and why it's so important that all of us rally around them and support them until they get the contract that they deserve. So I'm going to turn it over to our incredible panel in just a second, but as we always do, we want to make sure that our listeners have at least some baseline context to understand the rest of the conversation that we're going to have today. So I just wanted to read a couple passages from a great breakdown that was published last month at Labor Notes by the great Dan DiMaggio and Keith Brower Brown. And of course, we're going to link to this in the show notes along with other helpful links for y'all so you can keep reading up on this contract fight. And the major changes that have happened within the UAW in recent years, which we're also going to talk about today. But just to sort of give y'all some of that baseline context, Dan DiMaggio and Keith Brower Brown write in Labor Notes, quote, "The clock is ticking towards September 14th at midnight, when the auto workers' contracts with the big three automakers expire. The new leaders of the UAW have come out swinging, and in quickly growing numbers, members are stepping up to prepare for a strike. The agreements cover close to 150,000 workers at Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. In early August, President Shawn Fain presented a list of the members' demands to the companies, calling them, quote, the most audacious and ambitious list of proposals they've seen in decades, end quote. These bargaining goals are aimed at undoing concessions extracted by the companies from previous union administrations since before the Great Recession. A major goal is to ensure that the transition to electric vehicles is not used to further undermine auto workers' standards. Entering this round of bargaining, the Big Three have reported a combined $21 billion in profits in the first half of 2023. This comes on top of profits of $250 billion over the last 10 years. Quote, our message going into bargaining is clear. Record profits mean record contracts, Fain told UAW members on Facebook Live August 1st. Instead of the UAW's past tradition of targeting just one auto company in bargaining, then basing contracts for the others off that model, Fain warned all three companies to consider themselves targets, keeping them guessing about which one may ultimately be struck, or whether union members might walk out at all three. In 2019, 49,000 UAW members struck GM for 6 weeks. Among the demands Fain presented are eliminating tiers on wages and benefits plus double-digit raises for all, restoring cost of living adjustments, which were suspended during the Great Recession, restoring the defined benefit pension and retiree health care for all. Workers hired since 2007 have neither. Increasing pensions for current retirees. There's been no increase since 2003. The right to strike over plant closures. A, quote, working family protection program, which means if the company shut down a plant, they would have to pay laid-off workers to do community service work. Making all current temps permanent employees with strict limits on the future use of temps, and increasing paid time off, end quote. All right. So that's just kind of the opening salvo here. Let's dig in deep to the rest of this historic contract fight with our incredible panelists. Marcy, I want to start with you and ask if we could go around the table, as we love to do on this show. We want to get to know more about our fellow workers, like how you came to do this work. What was the path that led you to doing the kind of job that you do now? What does that job look like? Because most of us will have literally no idea what you three like do on a day-to-day basis, and we're hungry to learn about it. So yeah, tell us a little more about your own path into the auto industry, the kind of work that you do, and the kind of issues that you have seen and experienced firsthand that are, you know, really at issue here in this contract fight.
Yeah, so thanks for having me again. So as I said, I'm an electrician. I started in construction, but you know, as we know, that can be kind of a on and off again type job, you know, where you have to go look for work. And sometimes, you know, you're not working for weeks at a time and you might lose your benefits. So actually it was back in 2013 or 2012 when Chrysler, at the time, Chrysler called me. They found my resume online. They said, hey, we need more tradespeople. And I was like, where is this plant? They said, Belvedere. I was like, I don't know where that is. They said, it's right near Chicago. I'm like, that's nowhere near Chicago. It's near Rockford. So anyway, I moved my family in 2013 to move to Belvedere to work at Chrysler Belvedere Assembly Plant, which has now been idled. And, you know, it was just for something more steady. You know, I took a pay cut at first because, you know, coming from the outside to the inside, it was a big pay cut, but steady work, great benefits, you know, all that stuff. And I was there 3.5 years. And then even though I was always back and forth coming home to Chicago, where I'm from. So then I saw that Ford was hiring, and now I work at Ford Chicago Assembly Plant here on the Southeast side, which is right near 10 minutes from where I live. And I've been fortunate to be there 7 years, but I've done all kinds of things from, you know, babysitting robots, troubleshooting, working on panels, VFDs, you know, there's a lot. And now I do more like preventive maintenance work in the paint department. So making sure all the trades have their, you know, work tickets and creating work orders based on what kind of maintenance needs to be done in our department. So it's been you know, a lot of learning experience, especially coming from the outside doing pipe and wire. I come to this industry and they're like, oh, what do you know about PLCs? I'm like, well, I had a class, an apprenticeship program, but I never used it on the outside, you know, but I've learned a lot and had robotics training. And yeah, so it's just been, you know, a great experience, you know, learning new things. But, you know, it's also, you know, it's a time where like we're realizing that like I've been, you know, in the UAW 10 years now, and this past contract, we've only received a 3% raise every 2 years. So that's 6% over the last 4 years. And that doesn't even catch up, or, you know, it doesn't even compare to inflation, which has been like more than 3 times that, you know. So when they say, oh, look, you're getting this raise or this lump sum bonus, you know, it's just, it's the bonuses just come and go. You know, they don't, like, that's why we're fighting for cost of living allowance, because that's permanent, you know.
Well, me as myself, me being at Jefferson North Assembly Plant, I work in final. I've worked in all the departments in assembly, trim, chassis, final. Little bit in body shop when I was a TPT. And when I began working there in 96, I actually left another facility that used to build parts for Chrysler, and that was the Sebring. And I got a phone call from my girlfriend, like, hey, my aunt worked at unemployment agency. She told us to come down and fill out the app. And I'm like, bet. I'm like, so we rushed down there, we fill out the app. And it's been, almost 27 years counting the TPT time that I've been at Jefferson North Assembly Plant. And back then, we was at minimum wage, and that was minimum, literally, like, I want to say $7-8 an hour. So when I came to Chrysler, that was such a blessing for me, because I had already purchased a house at the age of 21. So that was like Oh my God. I was at 12. We started at 12.54. And now the kids starting at like $17, $18. And when I tell them I started at 12.54, they like, here? You was making only 12.54 working here? They like really thrown back with that. And I was like, Chrysler was like everything back in '96, just to try to get back in the big three, because it was so hard to get in GM for a Chrysler. So, and I remember filling out the app. I put all of it, part-time, full-time, anytime. Just let me get my foot in the door. So I was very happy to come and work at Chrysler, because like I said, back then, it just meant everything, and you was not getting that type of pay. I was just like almost like 3-4 years out of high school. And I didn't immediately go to school, to college. I did have some experience with community college at the time. But with that rate, it was like really unheard of. So I felt like working at the big three was like a blessing to me and my family. And I have 3 boys that have come up in the ranks, not at Chrysler, but off our livelihood.
Yeah, it's powerful listening to everyone's stories. Mine actually starts in the 60s. My grandfather hired into AMC Kenosha. When that closed down, he got hired into Janesville, Wisconsin. My mom, sorry, I'm battling a little bit of the cold. The kids got me. My mom got hired in. I think she's a 96er too. And then, the recession hit and we were forced to move. Our plant closed. So we packed everything up and my mom waited until she got her final offer and Kansas City was it. So I was like, sure. I mean, I'm ready for an adventure. It's my senior year of high school. So we moved down here, and then I went back to Wisconsin, went to college, put my name in there. Like they said, it was like impossible to get in. It's a lottery system. At least it was for me. You're just waiting to see if your name gets pulled. And I finally got called. I was like a semester away from my associate's degree. And I remember sitting at my table, just doing the math. I was like, man, I could continue. I could get this degree. I could graduate. I could have all this student debt, or I can go and follow in the footsteps of my family. And hopefully, I was looking at the past experiences. It was good enough for my grandfather to move his family out of a double wide into a home. It was good enough for my mom to actually buy her first new car ever after she got hired in. I mean, these jobs used to be life-changing jobs. It set the standard for not just manufacturing, but all of them, the working class in America. So I got hired in and I just kind of bounced around. I've done just about everything. I'm in general assembly, so we do all the inside of the vehicle. I've done material. I've been back in body shop. I've been a team leader. Right now I'm in the pool. So I can go to any job in my group. And I'm just pretty much expected to be able to walk onto that job or do that job with minimal training. And I could even be removed from my group and sent to another group because I'm a pool guy. So I could go to group one, and it's the same kind of conditions. You're trying to free up a team leader or somebody else, get them off the line so they can watch your brothers and sisters or the people in their area. So you're expected to be able to kind of walk onto this job that would take some people 4 hours a day, 3 days, and you're just expected to walk on and do it. I could be doing anything on any given day, and I like it that way. I like to bounce around. Some people don't like it, but I've found through my 10 years is like when you get to one job, I mean, people don't realize you're stuck in the same like 10 feet area for hours and hours. I mean, your life kind of turns into a Dr. Seuss book: 1 car, 2 car, red car, blue car. So I love to bounce around. So that's just a little bit about me.
Well, I want to actually pick up on that real quick and do like a sort of mini round around the table, because y'all are doing such different jobs, or you could do a different job depending on what day of the week it is, right? And so I just wanted to give listeners like a sense of like what a typical week looks like, if there is such a thing for you. Like, because again, like we're talking about the auto industry. Like, we know in general that it's hard work, but I still think a lot of people don't know what that entails. So like, just to give folks more of a sense of like the real day-to-day grind that we're talking about here, could we go back around the table and just, like, tell me like what a typical week looks like for you? Like, how long are you working? What's your commute like? What does it look like in there? Just give folks more of a sense of what you go through on a week-to-week basis.
Okay, I'll start. And I wanted to add some other stuff from before that I didn't say. So you can put this in later if you want. Also, I wanted to mention that I'm a 4th generation union worker. My family, I come from a long line of steel mill workers and railroad workers that worked on the southeast side, before the steel mills closed, and basically, like just left their community in despair. But a typical week, let's see, for trades, we keep the line running, right? And as production knows, when the line stops, the management all of a sudden, right away they're calling for maintenance to come out, whether electricians usually first, and it's something that we can't correct, then, we might need a millwright or a pipe fitter, depending on the problem, And at my plant, they trades work 12-hour shifts, and it's usually 3 or 4 days a week, or 5 or 2 days a week. And it's weird, the weekend, and it's every other weekend, day or night. So it could be a long day or a long night. And it could be, you could do anything from just making your rounds, making sure everything's running correctly, servicing equipment, and during the little breaks or lunch or shift change, changing parts, making sure that everything's ready for the next shift. Or sometimes, when something breaks down, they're on us like all the bosses come from everywhere in the plant, it seems, and they're like hovering over you, bird dogging us, like, why isn't it running? Why isn't it running? Seconds is money. And it's just like every second that the line is down and freaking out. So we could be like running around, like trying to reset a panel or a robot, or trying to like get the ovens back up and running, in the paint shop. And then some of these conditions, are really hot. Like, most of the plants don't have air conditioning. I don't know. Some areas do, but it's mainly to protect the equipment, like in a paint shop, So we could be running to the roof to check the RTOs, or, working right near an oven, which, just because it's turned off, it's still like really hot around those ovens. I remember working one breakdown. We were pretty much every electrician in that department working on this communication issue. And we were there for hours, and like they had to bring us water, and, we were just melting. And by the time we were done, we had to change our coveralls because everyone was just soaking wet. But, not every day is like that. It's just like, it just depends on what's going on. Like a lot of these plants I know our plant runs 24/7, and there's hardly any time to do the basic maintenance that we need to do to keep the plant running in an efficient manner. They just want to make cars and produce. And a lot of times, they don't care about the conditions of the equipment. They're like, oh, let's work a Super Saturday, Super Sunday. It's like, all right, well, where's our 24-hour time that we have to go in and like fix the problems so that you don't have these breakdowns, throughout the week or the next shift even. But they don't really look into that, I guess.
Well, for me, I am over in 91, 94, which we call Rows and Marrows. And I am working. They actually have our plant at critical status, meaning we're supposed to be actually working Sundays too as production. We only work one production Sunday. Thank God, because we still been on 6 days, 10 hours. In my department, we also do reprocessing, meaning the unavailable vehicles that have defects, we actually come in and we have to process those cars through rolls and marrows. So if they're not working on a Sunday, we are canvassed to work overtime on a Sunday in our area. So some last month, I believe, the last 2 months, I could say I had almost worked, and I was counting about 23 days straight. And I was like, I can't, when they come around and ask for overtime or ask, could I come in? And on a Sunday or Saturday, if it was an off Saturday, I'm like, I got to turn it down, because I know at this point my body is going to break down. I'm just barely just like getting over a cold myself. And I know my immune system will just automatically break down. So we're working nonstop as well. And we felt like that because they felt like we may strike, they was kind of stockpiling the cars as well, just trying to build whatever they could build, and we'd get it on the back end. We'd repair those cars on the back end. So at the same time, you want the money because you don't know if you're going to go on strike, and you want to try to put money aside. And then I still have a 13-year-old that's in school, my last Mohican, I call him, that I had to school shop for and things of that nature. And just going to the grocery store and spending $250 at Costco's like nothing. And then I still have to go to Myers and buy some of the stuff that they didn't have at Costco's. So I'm spending a good $400 at least on groceries. So I'm appreciating the overtime, but at the same time, I'm getting burnt out. We are really getting burnt out, and I try not to complain, and I thank God for the job, for the opportunity, but at the same time, we are getting burnt out.
And I mean, the nature of my job is I never know what's gonna go on. But when I was a team leader, to kind of tag on what Marcy said, I mean, when the moment that line goes down, and like it's a high stress situation, because the moment your line goes down, the moment a job in your team goes down, management's right there on the radio, and they're like, what's going on at 154? What's going on at 210? Like what is it? And it's like, I mean, it's only been like 5 seconds, guys. Let me at least get up out of my chair and walk over there. You gotta like just imagine that there's a never ending stream of work as far as your eye can see, and you're just sitting there in the same 15-foot footprint, and you're walking back and forth. And this isn't like a slow walk. This is you got to keep up, or that line is going down. And if that line goes down, and if it goes down too many times, management's going to be standing there bird dogging you, watching. So you're standing there, you're walking back and forth. You're probably going to walk 10 to 15 miles a night, just in that same 15-foot footprint. You're going to be adding parts to the car. The jobs at my plant run at about 58 seconds. So every 58 seconds, you got a new job. But you can't even really look at it at the tack time or the job time. It's more of the load time. So at our plant, a lot of our jobs are 98% plus loaded. So these are busy jobs. And even the jobs that are less loaded, it's because the management came through with their little stopwatch, because they'll do this every year and they'll time the job. But they shave off half seconds, quarter seconds and they make the job work on paper, and then they stand back and scratch their head wondering why the line keeps on going down. Well, because last year it took me 2 seconds to do this push pin, and now it only takes me 1 second to do the push pin. So you do the math. And it's hard work. There's a lot of facilities. I'm actually kind of fortunate. My facility is climate controlled. So during the heat of the summer, you know, it could be 110 outside, and we're lucky, and it's the plant's staying at about 90 degrees, you know, but that's still hot for physical labor. You go over to 249, the Ford plant, and they're not climate controlled. They're out there. If it's 110 outside, you know, it's 120 in the factory, and they're getting heat relief breaks. They're getting, literally, people are wheeling water up and down the aisles just to give people water breaks. I mean, it's insane that we are in 2023 and we can't even have like basic conditions inside of the factories. And then you think about the dock workers, you know, they're driving into these semi trucks that are really nothing more than convection ovens when it's this hot outside. And then you go in the wintertime and then it's freezing cold. So there's a lot of things. In my 10 years, before I turned 27, I'm 31 now. Before I turned 27, I had trigger finger, carpal tunnel in both my wrists, frozen shoulder. I had blown out my back because I was on a job where I was literally bending over 90 degrees. So you do that for 420 times a night, do that times that by 5 or 6, you know, and that's how many cars you're doing in a week. And my plant's one of the lucky ones. We do 9-hour shifts. We're only slated to do 8, but we've been doing an hour of mandatory overtime. We've been scheduled a lot of Saturdays. Right now, the supply chain's so wonky that they've been canceling them. They'll schedule it. And this is another great thing that management does. They'll schedule a Saturday, and then before the weekend comes, they're like, oh, we don't actually need you guys. Like, it's Wednesday. And it's like, oh, thanks. You know, I could have gone out and enjoyed the time with my family, but instead, you know, so we can't have vacations where we're in there in sweltering conditions. You know, the work has gotten, it's essentially a speed up, because the work has gotten so bad and so busy that even if something as simple as a wire comes tangled to you down the line's going down. So it's really dependent. Like, everybody needs to do their job 100% every single time. And if you miss something, the next job's going to go down, and then that person's in the hole. So then that person's trying to catch up. And while that person's catching up, well, guess what happened to the person down the line from them? Well, they got in the hole. So, I mean, it's just a cascading effect. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it's like to work the line. It's hectic, it's stressful, but you do get your good days, you know, where everything just seems to be working, and you can just kind of listen to your music or audiobooks. That's why I'm a big fan of audiobooks, and just kind of zone out, because you've been on the job for so long that it's almost like your body's busy, but your mind's free.
Man, but I'll tell you one thing, my body's aching just listening to this. like I got a shitty back and a bad knee, and they're both hurting listening to you guys talk. And like, speaking as a former warehouse worker in Southern California, I know what it's like going into those trucks in the middle of summer. Like, when you say it's like a convection oven, you're not kidding. Like, you go out into the sun to cool off after coming out of one of those goddamn trucks. But I mean, like, and even just hearing this, right? I mean, I think folks can start to put together, you know, like, why y'all, just as workers in the auto industry who have such high demands put on you and your bodies and your brains and your coworkers and the different departments and the speed ups that affect your lives in the ways that y'all enumerated. I mean, even just thinking about that, the kind of working conditions and what it does to you as human beings trying to meet those quotas in such a high pressure and kind of high stakes environment, because we're also talking, I mean, we're talking industrial manufacturing. This is dangerous work too. You gotta know what you're doing, keep your wits about you, all that good stuff. So even just from that side, the daily work side, I can see why y'all are, fighting so hard to get a better contract that will make sure that you're paid adequately for that, better protect workers like yourselves who are in that situation. That all already makes a ton of sense. But of course, we're talking about, like, there's a lot of other context here behind this contract fight, right? And I just wanted to kind of like lay out sort of like how I come to it as an outside observer, just trying to sort of think about from my own vantage point, like, the changes that have happened to this industry. And I mean, geez, Torice, you can be talking about this going back to the late 90s. You've seen these firsthand. I mean, all of you have seen this firsthand, but I'm just speaking for myself. I remember when the economy cratered, in 2008. My family, like so many others, lost everything, including the house that I grew up in. That's where this show started years ago. But I remember those days. I remember the auto industry almost collapsing. I remember the American taxpayers bailing out, two of the auto manufacturers to the tune of $80 billion. I remember workers like yourselves taking concessions, giving concessions at that moment. And all of us around the country, it was like, look, we're in a crisis. We got to tighten our belts. We got to do what we can to keep this ship afloat. That was the mentality we were all in at that moment. And you guys and your co-workers showed up, right? You did what you had to do to keep the auto industry afloat. And you were explicitly promised by the big three automakers that you would get those concessions back when things turned around, when they were back in the black, when we weren't, on the lip of a volcano, like, facing imminent collapse. Fast forward, right, a couple years, right? And like I said, I started this show, and the first person I ever interviewed for it was my dad, Jesus Alvarez. We talked about losing everything in the recession. I was learning more about what workers across the country were going through when I started this show back in 2018. And one of the first big story that I just got obsessed with was the GM layoffs in 2018. I talked to folks in Ohio. I talked to folks in Michigan, where I was living at the time. I talked to folks in Oshawa, in Canada. People who were telling me that the Monday after Thanksgiving break, people who came back and were told that GM was eliminating 14,000 jobs, including white and blue collar jobs. And they were profitable. This was when GM was back in the black. This was after GM got a massive tax cut from, like everybody else, every other corporation from these assholes in Washington, like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, right? So they get these windfall profits from these tax cuts. You all made this industry profitable after the Great Recession. And how were you repaid? With more layoffs, with closures or idling. They always love to idle plants because they don't say they're going to close them. They just say, oh, we're not using it right now, but it effectively has the same effect. That's what happened to Lordstown, the storied plant in Lordstown, Ohio, right? I mean, this is what's been happening in plants all across the country. And right now, we're talking about an auto industry that is not where it was in 2008. In fact, I'm looking at the great background that Marcy has on our Zoom, including the rallying cry for the whole UAW. Shawn Fain's been saying it, record profits equal record contracts. So we've come a long way from 2008. And I'm just kind of, again, giving like my own sort of trying to put the pieces together as I've seen it over these past 15 years. I wanted to turn it back over to you guys and ask just like, what context do people need to understand what brought us to this point? Like, why is this contract fight so significant? And I mean, we haven't even touched on the reform movement within the UAW. You guys took control of your union. You got rid of a one-party administration that had ruled for like 70 years. Like, I mean, there's so much that has happened in this time, and I'm sorry I'm talking so long. It's just like, this is such an important fight that I'm hoping folks, I'm communicating effectively for folks, but I want to turn it back over to y'all and ask just like, yeah, how should we be framing this? Like, what is the context that led us to the point where we could see a major auto industry strike within the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, well, let me, you got me thinking about my story too. So let me take it back even further to like the 70s and 80s, you know, when Chicago made like the steel that built our city and skyscrapers across the country, right? And, you know, when those mills closed in my neighborhood in the southeast side of Chicago, it was devastating for our community. You know, like at some point there was, I think, I don't know, 100,000 or so workers in the mills, maybe more. And those companies just left. There's a great documentary about when Wisconsin Steel closed called Exit Zero by Christine Watley. And my dad worked at Wisconsin Steel, and he was laid off. And then eventually they just locked the gates and, you know, kicked everybody out. They took their pensions. They took their last couple paychecks. I mean, yeah, I've seen what it does to a community. And like, that's what reminds me or makes me think about Belvedere. And if I were still working there, I don't know if I would still be in the plant, because there is a skeleton crew of trades in the plant, you know, taking things apart and shipping it somewhere. I don't know where, but, you know, it would be devastating to the community of Belvedere. It's a small town. You know, they rely heavily on, you know, that all those jobs. And so just, you know, in these last few years, you know, workers are getting fed up, and we're tired. We've given so much, and the companies just keep taking and taking. And you know, we worked in a global pandemic, risking our health and safety for them to make profits off of our labor. And that's why you've seen like so many, you know, more strikes happening. I was just reading in the Washington Post about like, this is the most strikes this year since before the pandemic, right? Because, you know, it started when, well, most of us went back to work like after a couple months, right? Whereas a lot of people, especially the salary workers at Ford, got to work remotely. You know, it's not an option for most workers. And kind of jumping around a bit, but yeah, you know, like it started with the Kellogg strike, I think, and then you know, Caterpillar, John Deere, you know, SAG-AFTRA, and just countless CTU, Chicago Teachers Union, you know, huge organizers in the labor movement. And it's really making people like come together, because, you know, we shouldn't just classify ourselves as lower, middle, upper class. Like I have a family member who thinks that, you know, they're comfortable, they're upper middle class. I'm like, yeah, you still go to work every day, right? Your wife goes to work every day. You're working for a paycheck. Like you're not, you know, you're not part of that 1 or 10% even, you know, we're all working people, we're all working class. But corporations and you know, the billionaires want us to fight each other and say, well, no, they don't deserve this. And, you know, McDonald's workers don't deserve that, or, you know, Starbucks workers, you know, but it's like, what? They're getting what they want. They're getting us to fight each other, when really we should be fighting them, because there's more of us than them, you know? So I was going to add too about, well, issues with the trades specifically, like, you know, it seems like with production and trades wages, they're pretty close. You know, we make probably a couple bucks more an hour. So it's almost like if, you know, sometimes your production, you want to get in the trades, they think, oh, it's going to be easy. You know, it's not easy, but they're easier. But it's a lot of training, and they might think it might not even be worth it just for a few bucks more. And right now we're facing, you know, like there's more trades retiring, you know, the boomers, you know, most of the trades, I think over 50% are over the age of 45, you know, so we're going to need a lot more people getting in the trades. But if these wages stay stagnant the way they have been, nobody's going to want to do that, you know. But when I started in 99, it was ideal for me, because I went to University of Southern California for 2 years, couldn't afford to finish because the school was just so expensive. But as soon as I got in the apprenticeship, you know, I was able to pay off my college loans, buy a house, you know, stuff like that. But So yeah, they're going to have to, these companies are going to have to pay up and to be competitive if they want to have a strong and, you know, a good workforce.
COVID, and it's before then, but really when COVID happened, when the pandemic happened, people was literally fed up. That was like a real kicker, because I just remember how they had Taco Bell's open, McDonald's, all these fast food places open during the pandemic. Like, people was dying, you know what I'm saying, of COVID, and y'all felt like that was important to keep these places open. I literally felt like only thing that should have been open maybe was the gas station, grocery stores. That was the essential worker. They included Chrysler workers, GM, Ford. They considered us essential workers. And they was also, I remember looking at CNN saying like we supposed to be getting hazard pay. Like the people even at the restaurant should have been getting hazard pay because they was basically taking the risk of going to work every day and catching COVID. You know what I'm saying? So I'm looking like where our hazard pay at? Because I remember like our life had changed. We got the temperature, we can making sure we ain't got a cold and all this crap. We got the plastic dividers that's kind of dividing us sitting at the table. When that really happened, and they really expected us to come in, and I remember getting angry when people was coming running late because you literally was trying to find a babysitter, someone watch your kids. What you talking about? They tardy. They need to have a babysitter. You couldn't even people couldn't even take their kids over people's houses and the grandmother houses, the grandfather houses, because they didn't want to get them sick. So it was like that really opened people's eyes. Like, they didn't want to work here. They didn't want to work. They like F this job. You know what I'm saying? Literally, a lot of people didn't even come back after that because they were so afraid of catching COVID. But they felt like they wouldn't get enough money. Everything just started coming in on people, and they just felt like they was unappreciated. Of course, they like the wages is not enough. It wasn't nothing enough. For as I remember, that's what they told us. Like, y'all is killing the unemployment. So y'all need to hurry up and go back to work. And we literally was off maybe even at maybe the 2 months. But that's what really kind of kicked up all the smoke. Even with everything that's going on, COVID to me really just had people just fed up. Just like, oh, this is not enough. You know, you seeing your coworkers die. Oh my God, just family members dying. You know what I'm saying? We just was exhausted. During the pandemic, people didn't come back. They didn't come back to work. And we wasn't having enough people. The TPTs was literally used every day. Supplemental workers, whatever they want to call them. I think of a supplement as a vitamin, but they called them supplemental workers. They literally worked every day because people didn't come back to work. So I really felt like COVID was that was the kicker of people just being fed up and not being appreciated and really wanting more.
Getting back to the pandemic, you know, I just remembered, you know, I was like paying a small mortgage for childcare, and a lot of working parents were doing the same. You know, I'm a one-parent household, and even with just one kid, you know, I couldn't leave my kid home alone, and they were doing remote or online learning. So I had to pay someone to be at my house, someone that was willing to go into a house where they know that that person that lives there is going to a place every day with thousands of other people. So risking them, you know, risking getting sick themselves. And like I said, it was like paying another mortgage payment or a car payment. And, the little stimulus checks we got here and there, that didn't really make up for it. But that went on for like a year, I guess. I don't even know. So
I really think COVID was a great reset for a lot of workers. When you get that time off and you're at home and you're rediscovering, the people in your life. I mean, my plant was laid off for about 8 months, and I had just had my son. So for the first 8 months of his life, I got to watch him grow, and it's like every single day, he's hitting a new milestone. And then, a month down the road, you're holding him and you're like, hold on, you used to just cover part of my chest and now your legs are dangling off. What the hell happened here? So, I mean, I just think it was a really big reset. And another thing that people need to understand is like, we're not complaining. Every single person on this call, like this is something that's really deep within the big three. Like we might joke around and give each other shit, like, oh, Ford, oh, Dodge, and like all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, we're really loyal to our companies. We're really proud to work there. I mean, you go back to the 30s, and when people died, they literally get buried with their Ford badge. I mean, we're really proud of the work that we do. What we're trying to do is we're trying to save this industry for the generation coming after us. When I started in 2012, the starting wage was $15.78. In 2023, at GM, it is $16.67. And that's what your conditions are for 2 years, which is when you're mandatory hired. But if you break time for 30 days, so if you go through pretty much any layoff, your time restarts. And then after you're hired in, you have an 8-year grow-in pay scale. So for 10 years of your life, you're not at top pay. For 10 years of your life, you're trying to figure out, how are you going to make ends meet? How do you save for retirement when you can't even afford rent? Like if you look at what an average 2-bedroom apartment goes for in any area where the big three have operations, I'm pretty sure Kentucky, because I did the research for the Members United campaign, Kentucky is one of the only places where you can actually afford a 2-bedroom apartment on that wage. It's ridiculous. So we have a lot of systemic issues that we need to fix in this contract. And a lot of it was what we had already given up. We did it for the companies. We did it because of how proud we are of this industry. They came to us and they said, look, we're bankrupt. And it wasn't the UAW's fault. This was poor management. I mean, they're building SUVs when gas is going through the roof in 2008. And they're watching all these other manufacturers build cars. And they're like, well, let's double down on the SUV strategy. I mean, it was just ridiculous. It was gross mismanagement, but we still gave. And we gave because we wanted to protect the industry. Now we are going back to these companies and we're trying to save the industry. It's not about us. It's about everyone that's coming up after us. If my son or daughter decides to become a 4th generation UAW worker in one of these plants right now, I would tell them to go anywhere else. Because it's not worth it. I mean, the work, the toll it takes on your body. And then if you give 30 years to any of these companies, now they don't want to give you a pension. Okay, well, I mean, I gave you 30 of my best years. Like that's 30 years of missing family events. That's 30 years of you damaging and destroying my bodies. And then they also don't want to give you retiree health care because they don't want to fix you when they broke you. I mean, I can remember growing up, and now that I think about it after 10 years, and as a father, I can kind of put some sense into it. But like my dad would only play catch for, 5, 10, 15 minutes. And, you're a kid and you're like, come on, Dad, let's just keep on going. And, he's just getting done from work. And it's like, I finally understand it. And it's like, these conditions, they need to change. I mean, we can't We can't allow multi-billion-dollar companies to run people ragged like this. I mean, there's no reason. You have people working 90 days straight, 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. The longest I ever worked was 21 days in a row. And I was lucky. I consider myself lucky again at that time because I was in material. But guess what? That's still 21 days in a row. You're sitting, cranking your back, looking backwards. I mean, because you're in a factory. You know, the moment you're not twisted backwards and you're not watching where you're going, the moment you take your eye off that aisle, you could kill somebody. I mean, it's that serious. These plants, like it's I don't even know how to explain it. It's just this needs to change, and it needs to change now. Because if we can't win this, what's going to happen to the rest of labor? And as we transition to EVs, and they're about to lose their, it takes about 30% less of the workforce. So where's that 30% going to go? Well, the big three want it to go into Mary Barra's and Carlos Tavares. They want it to go into their pocketbook, but in the reality, it's got to benefit the workers. I mean, we got to stop letting these corporations get away with highway robbery. For example, GM reinstated the dividend at their company. They've spent about $5 billion on it. If they instead of reinstating the dividend, if they give every worker a raise, it would be about a $7 an hour raise for every single employee, for the same amount that they're given to the shareholders. For literally, they don't even hold a piece of paper. It's just an electronic share that pops up on their on their app, like Charles Schwab or whatever. I mean, you push people that care and they truly give a shit about your company, and you push them beyond their breaking point, beyond the normal lengths of human endurance, and eventually people are going to start to snap. And I think that's what you're seeing in this round of contract negotiations. I think that's what you're seeing with the reform movement. People just they're fed up. They're sick of it. They didn't want business as usual. They wanted somebody to win a transformational, historic contract. Record profits make record contracts. It's a great background. But I mean, it's the God honest truth. I mean, how can we as workers and as a society sit there and talk about the workers' demands and these are unimaginable demands. We can't possibly give these demands, but we never question the CEOs when they're spending all this money on stock buybacks, when they're giving their CEOs outrageous salaries, when they're spending money on the dividends. I mean, if we really want to be competitive, let's look at our CEO pay and compare it to Toyota. Toyota, $4 million. Mary Barra, $29 million. Like, I mean, it's not a worker problem. This is a corporate greed problem, and we got to fix it. We got to get back to having responsible corporations paying their workers decent wages with decent conditions, with decent benefits, and getting back to the way unions and labor used to fight and it used to be, because we've seen what happens when labor grows complacent. We've seen what happens when labor doesn't fight, and we just got to get back to our roots. And I think that's what's happening right now.
Well, and you make all of you, I mean, like really important points here, and that last one really sticks with me, right? Because I've been very open about this on the show and elsewhere, right? That I grew up very conservative, you know, in Southern California, in Orange County, no less. That was not a very union friendly place. You know, Marcy could tell you, like, you know, it's like kind of dicey, especially if we're talking about the 90s and the early aughts. And the narrative that I always heard as a young conservative with no real connections to organized labor, like I had some. On the Mexican side of the family, there were some union workers, but they didn't talk about it that much, at least not with us. But the whole narrative I was always told growing up, right, was based on your industry, right? It was based on examples like Flint and Lordstown and Chrysler in 1980, right? And what that narrative was like unions and union workers got too greedy. They asked for too much. And the poor, American auto companies had no choice but to, close up shop, drop economic nukes on entire communities, close plants, take those jobs abroad, pay workers, in other countries far less, deal with far fewer labor laws and environmental regulations, because that's what they had to do to stay profitable. And businesses need to be profitable, right? This was the common wisdom that I grew up with. And it's like, well, first off, let's we got a lot of problems with that narrative, but like I think the point that y'all made is just so important, where it's like, well, why the F are we not applying the same standard to the executives and the shareholders? Like if they are paying themselves billions of dollars, if they are more profitable than they've ever been off your backs, is anyone going to stop and say like, hey, these vultures at the top are literally like siphoning all of the wealth out of our communities. They're not hurting. It's not the union's fault. It's not a worker problem. It's a corporate greed problem, as Nick said. Like, when are we going to make that turn as a culture? When are we going to apply the same kind of just like conviction with which we have talked about the decline of the auto industry as a cipher for like the problem with unions in this country in general and workers demanding too much? When are we going to apply that kind of standard or that kind of criticism to corporate America while they are making billions and billions of dollars? Like, that's what I want to know, just as an American at this point. But I could talk to you guys for hours, but I know you've got busy lives, you've got busy jobs, you're in the midst of this contract fight, and I promised you I wouldn't keep you longer than an hour. So, like, if I can, just a few more minutes, I want to kind of end on that note of, like, what happens now, right? Like let's bring the focus back to the contract. We haven't even talked about much the reform movement that led to y'all ousting the previous administration, voting in through the Reform Unite All Workers for Democracy caucus, really rallying behind a new administration, winning all the seats that you contested. Before that, passing a referendum that meant that UAW members would vote more democratically for their union leadership, a one-member, one-vote system, as opposed to the previous delegate system, which enabled the previous administration to stay in place for so many years, right? This is very similar to what we saw play out with the Teamsters, right? We all know the history of the corruption, the mob, Hoffa. There's a lot of dark stuff in the Teamsters past, even as it is a storied and important union that has done so much good for working people in this country. But of course, it's got a lot of bad skeletons in the closet as well. And so after that all came to a head in the 80s and 90s, the Teamsters were forced to have democratic elections within their union. And that is what laid the groundwork decades later for that union to elect Shawn O'Brien and their reform slate, and then Shawn O'Brien and that new administration coming in, rallying UPS Teamsters and saying, we are turning the tide, no more concessionary bargaining, no more of this working us to death crap, like we are coming back to get what is ours. And we just saw them, win a historic contract. There's always more fighting to do. As we know, there's always more that we need to get back. The contract is not perfect, but it's a shit ton better than what Teamster UPSers have been getting for many, many years. Y'all are in a similar situation, right? We know that the UAW leadership has been rife with corruption. The FBI just did a multi-year investigation that landed multiple leaders, including 2 former UAW presidents, in prison, right? Like, that's bad. But what I want people listening to understand is like that doesn't just mean you give up on the union and you say, you know what, like I'm just gonna trust my employer to treat me nicely, right? I'm gonna put all my hope in my boss because my union leaders are corrupt. No. You take hold of that union. You fight with your coworkers to make it better and to better represent you. That is what UAW members did. That's an incredible feat. They got one member, one vote. And then they used that new voting system to vote in this reform slate with Shawn Fain as UAW president. Now he, with the members who are rallying behind him in this contract fight, are ready to come to go to the mat, right? and say like, you know, yeah, we're not taking more of these concessions. We're not sitting idly by while y'all rake in record profits and pay out shareholder dividends and all that crap. Like, we are coming back for what's ours. So this is like I wanted to just smush that in because the reform movement discussion, we could do a whole other podcast on that. But I want to just make sure that folks like understood, like it's been mentioned by our great panelists. I just wanted to give y'all some of that context before we hit this final question, kind of a rapid fire round around the table. Then I promise I'll let everyone go. I just wanted to ask if we could go back around and highlight like any key issues that you want listeners to focus on. Like what is this fight really about? What are the issues that y'all are prepared to go on strike over? And most importantly, what can we all do within the labor movement and beyond? What can people, working people do to stand in solidarity with y'all if a strike happens or not?
Hey, that's a lot to unwrap there. Let's see. First of all, yeah, I'm just so glad of the transparency from our newly elected leadership. You know, I think they're doing a great job at getting the rank and file fired up. You know, we mean business, you know, now. And I just came like right before this, we had our practice picket at our union hall. We have another one coming up this Friday. So I would just, you know, urge people to support us, you know. If you see us on the picket line, support us if you can. Give us a honk. Donate to our strike pantry. You know, pass out some gas cards. Whatever you can to support. And you know, workers just need to support each other. You know, like we're all fighting for like decent living wages and conditions. You know, coming in after 2013, I'm not considered a legacy employee, but because I'm trades, you know, I didn't have to start at a lower tier, but I don't have a pension. I don't have lifetime medical. You know, these are issues that are important to me. You know, like obviously, you know, we all need huge wage increases across the board because we see what profits these companies are making, and you know, it's time for them to give back what everyone has lost these past, you know, over a decade now, 15 years almost. So yeah, like I said, just support our pickets, our contract. You know, let's not fight each other over, well, you shouldn't make this, or you should just be happy you have a job. You know, I hate reading the comments on any of the union, you know, posts that I see. Like, I just try to ignore it. But if you're fed up, then organize a union in your own workplace, you know, whether it's an office or a factory or a store. You know, you deserve better wages and benefits too. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'm happy you did mention the reform, one member, one vote. That was the best thing since sliced bread. I can say that because I did used to be in leadership, and I did consider our former presidents and VPs as my superiors. That was such a slap in the face in what we endured. And it was vital that we had one member, one vote pass. I am so happy that we have Shawn Fain as our president, and the rest of the IEB board that did get elected. What people have to realize, these individuals was part of the rank and file just months ago. They was in these plants. They had endured everything that we're talking about have talked about for this past hour, they knew everything that we experienced. So it is so important that these individuals are in these positions that they are in. And that's why this contract will be epic. It will be epic. Record profits, record contracts. That's the sum of everything what Shawn been saying. We are not trying to be greedy. We just asking for our piece of the pie. We do not care what the CEOs are making. If they would give us a couple of $1 million of what they're getting a year out their $24 million salary and gave it back to the members, that would be epic. We're not asking for much. All we asking for is our due diligence. And I do have a pension, but I do want my brothers and sisters that came in there after me to have a pension, because even the ones that have a pension, they didn't even realize I had to tell a full-time worker that has a pension. I said, they don't get nothing after when they leave, literally. And she's like, what you mean? I said, they don't have dental glasses, they don't have nothing, they just quit. And she was like, oh my God. So this last week I'm telling someone this. So that's the division that this has caused. And that's why it's so important for them to get a pension also. Their bodies hurting just as like our body hurting. My feet ache. When I get off the car, I have to calm down and just sit in the car for a minute because my feet is hurting. Their feet are hurting. Their back's going to be hurting. They're not going to be able to see. They may need dentures. This is what we are talking about. Yes, we had to go back and say, hey, we're not going to offer pensions, but they did make a deal and say, hey, once we do better, we're going to give back. Now, all that then went out the window, and they just want to say, oh, we just got these workers and this is what it is. No, this is not what it is. This is not what it has to be. We all are one big family in the UAW, and if we get pensions, they need to have pensions too. COLA, everything that we're asking for, we're not asking for much. We just asking just for a little. And I love to come back because it was so much that need to be said as well. But I love Shawn Fain, and I thank him for everything that he is out there trying to do. And I pray for his mental health, because this stuff is not easy. Mentally, physically, none of it. I pray for all of our union leadership. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just anybody that if you think your union's not working, I mean, UAWD, TDU, we have proven that you can reform your union, you can transform your union. Your union is not the leadership. You are the union. The rank and file is the union. The union is not an outside entity. It is you. If you have a problem with it, step up and change it. And you can change it in a really big way. How can people support us? I mean, there's the obvious things, like come down to our picket line and talk to people. I told you this, Max, on our last interview. That's at my plant. That'd be 2,000 different stories, 2,000 different reasons of why people are standing out there. But more importantly, if you really want to support us, if you really want American manufacturing to exist, we got to buy union-made products that are built here. You got to support your communities, and you got to check your VINs and make sure they're not built somewhere else. If you want these jobs to stay here, if you want these jobs to be good for the next generation, I mean, that's a really big part of it is supporting union labor, supporting hardworking people like those on this call and the 150,000 of us across the nation. And it's so much bigger than just us, because for every job in the auto plant, it supports I've seen numbers 7 to 9 jobs outside of it. That's in the supply chain, right? So you got your suppliers, and all of these people depend on this industry. I mean, this is over 1 million jobs we're talking about that's going to be affected if we go out. So come down to our picket lines, support us, talk to us. You know, we're not unfriendly people. I mean, this is, I mean, we're everyday people like you, like the person that you wave hi to as you're driving down the street. You know, you give them the 2-finger, the 3-finger wave, whatever your choice is on the steering wheel. I mean, we're just like you. We just want our fair shake at the table. We want these jobs to be good paying jobs, and we want corporate America to stop fleecing the workers. I mean, that's what this is. The Shawn always says the talking heads say class warfare, but it's only class warfare when the working class people start stepping up. And I'm sorry if you can hear my son in the background. It's getting to be his bedtime, and he wanted to come down and say hi. So I just thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Max, for having us on. And I mean, there's so much. I mean, we could sit down and we could probably talk for 5 hours. I mean, there's so much that can be said about this fight and what it's going to mean. And I can't wait to read the analysis of it from Labor Notes and everything else in the future, and the Real News Network, and see what you guys have to think about it. But I appreciate you guys, and thank you for having me.
Thank you again for having me as well. And I didn't even know about this podcast, but I am a subscriber to In These Times. So I get the magazine at home, a hard copy.
Yeah, In These Times rocks, baby.
Thanks, Max.
And I will subscribe as well and start supporting your podcast. I think this is a wonderful communication piece for the working class and for everything that you're trying to do. So I would love to support you as well.
Hey, while everyone's here, is it okay if I share a little screen grab of all of us sitting here and say, get ready for an awesome podcast that's about to drop and tag y'all on Twitter?
Yeah, yes. Sure. Well, let me stop the recording real quick. So